The directors whose movies have Once Upon a Time in the title must have met and secretly conspired to engineer some of the longest runtimes in movie history. Other than Once Upon a Time in Mexico, the other 6 movies I'll review here are over 2 hours long. Of those 6, only Once Upon a Time in China is under 2 hours and 30 minutes. It's not that I'm scared of long runtimes. It's just that every time I see Once Upon a Time in America's runtime, I opt to go on a YouTube binge watch instead. Therefore, I had to find a way to force myself to watch Once Upon a Time in America. The making of this video is my solution to the boundless procrastination that's inflicted on me by such a long runtime. Join me then as I review 7 movies whose average runtime is 2 hours and 50 minutes. Think of this as me preparing for an inevitability, a task I've been putting off for as long as I could. The review of Satantango. Once Upon a Time in Mexico was released in 2003. This means that the director had all the time in the world to have watched Once Upon a Time in America, in the West, and in China. Nothing was learned from these great movies. Not how to write a plot, nor how to properly execute gunfights. It seems the only idea that was gleaned from these previous films was the presence of a larger-than-life plot. I knew, even before I clicked play, I knew that this movie was a sequel. I have not watched Desperado, but I sure do hope that it's far more cohesive than Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Anyway, I thought I'd be a bit confused by the plot because this was a sequel. But no, in fact, in a matter of seconds, after the movie starts, we are brought up to speed. There's a lot happening in this movie. There are multiple revenge plots. A retired FBI agent wants revenge for his partner, and El Mariachi wants revenge because his wife, Salma Hayek, was killed by a general. This general has ties to a major drug cartel, and he's been asked to kill the Mexican president. The CIA, who are totally fine with the assassination, do not want the general or the leader of the cartel to leave after the assassination. So they blackmail El Mariachi to help them kill the general once the assassination succeeds. At some point, I stopped paying attention to the plot and just focused on the thickness of the plot armor this movie places on El Mariachi and his accomplices. If this plot and its execution had been in the hands of the geniuses who constructed Sicario, it might have been one of the greatest movies of all time. Instead, what we get is a plot that exists as an excuse for some of the most outlandish action sequences of all time. There are parts of this movie that make the Fast and Furious franchise feel normal. Johnny Depp plays one of his usual eccentric characters. In this one, he's a CIA agent sent to Mexico to achieve something. As expected, nothing goes according to plan. His partners betray him. He gets blinded, but still, he goes out shooting. Imagine a blind man winning a shootout against a cartel enforcer. Once Upon a Time in Mexico is a bad movie, but at least it kept me laughing. El Mariachi wants revenge. The general killed his wife and child, and for this reason he accepts Johnny Depp's proposal rather quickly. However, this doesn't feel right. It has been years since the general killed his wife. Why did he wait until a CIA agent offered him a mission for him to embark on a vengeful rampage? Throughout this movie, it feels as if the plot is happening because this is a movie and a movie needs a plot. Characters do weird things. Half-baked plot points are put on screen and resolved as quickly as they were contrived. But before you can question the movie's ability to deliver a competent story, another ridiculous action sequence happens. This movie doesn't deserve its Once Upon a Time title. The plot is far too childlike, character motivations are mostly unclear or outrightly weird, and the action sequences are far too ridiculous to be taken seriously. For this reason, I give it a 4 out of 10. China is an old and proud civilization. It was the dominant force in East Asia for most of its history. That is no longer the case at the start of this movie. China is going through its century of humiliation. This is a period of time when Western powers divided up the country and proceeded to take advantage of its natural resources and people. It's during this period that the British take over Hong Kong and the Portuguese steal Macau. Half of this movie is preoccupied with nostalgia, while the other half is suffused with painful realization. In the first half, the main characters rally against change. They might be surrounded by Westerners, they might be completely overpowered, but they have a culture, a way of life to protect. In the second half, it becomes clear that this cannot go on forever. The Americans and the British are taking a lot of liberties with the local population. None has the firepower to protect the innocent, not even the government. That's why things must change. If China doesn't divorce with its past, it will not succeed in kicking out its foreign occupants. Jet Li plays Master Wong, a kung fu master in charge of a local militia called the Black Flag Army. Officially, the Black Flag Army is meant to be a deterrent against further Western occupation. However, for most of the movie, the militia spends its time fighting against the Shahua gang that has been terrorizing the town. Master Wong also gets bogged down by a political rivalry with the governor, who is pro-foreign occupation and against Kung Fu. He actually believes that the Black Flag Army is responsible for the criminal activities being carried out by the Shaho gang. Consequently, the infighting that happens throughout this movie distracts Master Wong. His mission to fight further Western expansion is being slowed down by rival Kung Fu masters, local Chinese gangs, and a local government that's indifferent. Nevertheless, he's still an influential individual who has the respect of everyone in town. The Shaho gang, to counter Master Wong's influence, aligns itself with Mr. Jackson, an American who's making money by taking the Chinese to America and placing them in indentured servitude in California. The gang decides to participate in Mr. Jackson's human trafficking scheme by agreeing to kidnap local women for him. When the final third of this movie arrives, Master Wong and his Black Flag Army are forced into a battle that has two fronts. The first front is the internal struggle. The Chinese people need to be united if they are to succeed. They can't have gangsters running around causing problems. They can't have a governor who is more friendly to foreigners. The second front is against Westerners who have greater firepower and very little regard for Chinese lives. This will be a battle that will last for longer, one that will require much more than martial arts and unity. This is a question that is asked as the movie winds down. If America has so much gold, what are they doing in China? Throughout the movie, Jet Li, the Black Flag Army, and even the governor have been laboring under the assumption that the West is superior. This question makes them realize that China might actually be in possession of something that the West needs, something that they could use to fight back. This thematic conclusion gives Master Wong the permission to embrace change. At the end of the movie, Master Wong has learnt a valuable lesson. The way to fight against the West isn't by basking in tradition. China must evolve. Master Wong and his Black Flag Army have to adapt. Kung Fu cannot fight back against guns. This is a fun movie with impressively choreographed martial arts scenes and a theme that deserves the Once Upon a Time title. The film is not weighed down by its subject matter either. There's a lot of humor in the movie and a lot of human moments that made it easy for me to empathize with the characters. For this reason, I give it a 9 out of 10. These are the 3 Turkish movies that I have watched up to this point. Only after finishing Once Upon a Time in Anatolia did I realize that The Wild Pear Tree was also made by the same director. While The Wild Pear Tree felt like a book that was assigned to me by my English teacher, a book that I had to read despite my protestations, Once Upon a Time in Anatolia is akin to beautiful philosophical fiction. It's a story without any form of cathartic ending, and yet it lingers imperiously after its conclusion. This is a story about men, all of them full of demons, all of them trying to survive. Ostensibly, Once Upon a Time in Anatolia is presented as a crime thriller. Do not go into this movie expecting a Turkish rendition of Seven. This film reveals no cat-and-mouse chases, clever villains, nor genius detectives. Instead, it reveals the fears that men hide from themselves, the lies they tell others, and the great narratives that must be woven if one is to wake up each morning. In the early minutes of the movie, right in the middle of finding a murder victim, the police chief and his officers start an argument regarding buffalo yogurt. Yes, yogurt. Following this, we will have discussions regarding the police chief's family life. Later on, the conversation will be focused on the prosecutor and whether he might have prostate cancer. It might seem that the story is more focused on everything but the murder. At the beginning, we don't even know who's been murdered. We just know that Kenan, the suspect, dumped him somewhere in Anatolia, somewhere that there is a fountain and a round tree. Throughout the night, Kenan frustrates the police chief and the prosecutor. At one point, the police chief outrightly beats up Kenan after he fails to lead them to the right spot. After this frustration, everyone takes refuge in a nearby village. It's here that we get the first glimpse of the motive. Kenan and the victim fought because they both claimed paternity to the victim's son. This revelation returns us once more to the frustrations felt by the characters in this mostly male movie. It seems that the characters are either burdened by responsibility they don't want, haunted by ghosts from the past, or are escaping from the truth altogether. This murder in itself is not important. The only reason it exists in this movie is that it's meant to shine a light on the darkness that is slowly consuming our characters. The prosecutor tells the doctor a story about a woman who predicted her death to the day. The woman tells her husband that she will die on the day she gives birth to their child. As soon as she holds the child in her arms, she says her goodbyes and dies. Her husband had not taken her seriously. No one could find the cause of her death, not even the prosecutor. At first, this story feels like an anecdote, a ghost story you tell your friend in the middle of the night when you're hunting for a murder victim. However, as the movie progresses, it turns out to be the main theme. It sticks around. The doctor doesn't buy that there was no cause of death. There's always a cause of death. It's just that the reason that this woman knew the day she would die is because she committed suicide. It's not until the end of the movie that the rest of the story is revealed. The woman's husband had been cheating on her. She also had access to medication that could be used to induce a heart attack. Her husband had falsely believed that she had forgiven him. It's at this point that I realized what the movie is about, or at least what it might be about. Intimate relationships and what happens when you mess them up. The main characters in this movie, the doctor, the police chief, the prosecutor, and our murder suspect, all have this in common. The doctor had to move to a small town after his marriage ended. The police chief dreads going back home because of his wife and his son. Our murder suspect killed someone because of a child whose paternity they both claimed. And our prosecutor has been walking around telling the story of the gorgeous woman without revealing what his actual role in the story is. Once Upon a Time in Anatolia is an exciting movie. If you enjoy beautiful prose that's unburdened by unnecessary action. If you watch Once Upon a Time in China just before this movie, you might not be blamed if you want to turn it off or find something that's more fast-paced. Nevertheless, I loved this movie. I enjoyed its quiet moments and I fell in love with the Anatolian landscape as a result. For this reason, I give it an 8 out of 10. By the time the 3 hours and 44 minutes of this movie were done, I had learned cricket. Not enough to convert me into a fan, but enough for me to understand the game. If I had gotten nothing else from this movie, this in itself would have been an impressive feat. Thankfully, I got much more than I bargained for. What I got was an epic story set to great music and wonderfully choreographed dance numbers. What I got was almost 4 hours of a plot that flew by so quickly, I had to confirm that the runtime was as long as advertised. While the movie did not convert me into a cricket fan, it did earn the privilege to be rewatched and to be endlessly recommended to my friends. This is a movie about struggle. It's a film about India during the late 19th century, a period during which the colonial grip around the necks of Indians was only getting tighter. In this regard, it's quite similar to Once Upon a Time in China. However, Once Upon a Time in India goes about its rebellion in a different way. It chooses to use cricket instead of martial arts. India loves cricket. India is very good at cricket. Surely there must have been a village in the late 19th century that used cricket to free itself from the chokehold of colonialism. It's a beautiful myth which was executed so well that by the end of the movie, I found myself on Google trying to find out if the film was based on a true story. The Raj of an Indian province goes to Captain Russell, the British officer who's in charge of his region, with a request. He'd like his people to gain access to a temple in the neighboring region. Captain Russell, who's a bully, asks the Raj to eat meat in violation of his religion. If he refuses to eat meat, Captain Russell will double the province's taxes. If he accepts, the temple will be opened up to the people. Obviously, the Raj won't violate his religious beliefs. His people are now faced with double taxation. The province is going through a major drought, and there's little chance that the people can afford any tax. Doubling it would be a death sentence. The people of the village of Champagne go to him to beg him to postpone the taxes. Captain Russell is with the Raj and he offers the village a choice. Beat him at a game of cricket or pay triple taxation. Our hero, Bhuvan, accepts the deal on behalf of the village. The villagers hate this, but they have no choice. This movie echoes the many other sports films where the underdog has to start from nothing before challenging Goliath. Bhuvan starts with little support. No one in the village likes the fact that he bet their entire livelihoods on a single game. Neighboring villages are angry about it and even attempt to take Bhuvan's life. Nevertheless, Bhuvan succeeds in winning over the villagers. He also succeeds in winning over Captain Russell's sister, who ends up teaching them the rules of cricket. The village of Champagne suffers greatly before it can taste success. Injuries, betrayals, and what seems to be an insurmountable challenge from the British are all nearly enough to get them to lose hope. The old system, where the villagers would simply accept the rule of the British, is still in place when the movie starts. It's the reason why Bhuvan struggles to gain any traction when he accepts Captain Russell's challenge. The villagers would rather pay double tax than confront the British. Bhuvan teaches the village a valuable lesson. Oppression doesn't simply disappear through compliance and servitude. Sometimes it gets worse. Sometimes you get a Captain Russell who cares little about you, your culture, or your people. Then you have to look at yourself in the mirror and accept that sacrifices must be made. In this regard, this film is quite similar to Once Upon a Time in China. Both movies are aware that change needs to happen, and both of them require the main characters to do something new, to adapt to a world that no longer plays by the old rules. This was a delightful movie. Unlike Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, which was reflective and quiet, this was loud and exciting. Its main character is outgoing, optimistic, and almost seduces you into joining his cricket team. The story is memorable, the music more so, and the final third is nail-biting. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. I think of this movie as Tarantino's love child, or to phrase it differently, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a revelation of the director's inner child. He has crammed, in a film that's just under 3 hours, he has crammed so many details, so many moments, that it's actually lucky this movie has anything that can be thought of as a plot. In fact, if we ripped out the storylines that make up this movie, and we observe them individually, they would not come off as competent. This storyline is safe though, because they are being held together by two of the greatest actors of all time, in Pete and DiCaprio. They're also redeemed because of the magnificent photography that accompanies them. Don't get me wrong, I'm in love with the movie, not because of the story though. As we all know, Tarantino has had grander tales put to screen. It's because of everything else. It's because of the invisible glue that holds all of the scenes together. It's because of the nostalgia and anger that emanates from the plot. And due to this, we get a rewatchable story made up entirely of anecdotes and wish fulfillment. This is in a way a love story. The girl is old Hollywood and the boy is our director. The girl and the boy never really dated. The boy was far too young when the girl was in her prime. This didn't stop him from romanticizing her or wishing he could possess her. He then spent the rest of his life thinking that if he had her, his life would have been perfect. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is suffused with nostalgia. You can feel the heartache that Tarantino has for the time when Hollywood was simpler, quieter, and when everything was about story and acting. There's a nostalgia for neon lights, for drive-in theaters, and for an era of film that was yet to be corrupted with our modern distractions. Tarantino's old Hollywood has to remain intact. It must survive external forces that threaten to rip it apart. Its beauty must be sealed. Yes, it has its flaws, but to be flawed is to be interesting. Tarantino knows this. For this reason, even when the movie closes, Tarantino has altered history. He has eliminated one of the blemishes of old Hollywood. He has restored the timeline to one that's more quiet and pure. The anger is in realizing that the girl you've been romanticizing was in fact flawed beyond redemption. Consequently, you venture into your imagination and you create a new narrative. You clean up the story. You beautify what has always been ugly. You shine a spotlight on what has always been exceptional. You silence those doubtful thoughts that will inevitably creep in. Tarantino is angry about a few things. He's angry that a bunch of hippies succeeded in murdering Sharon Tate. He's angry that this was allowed to happen. He's angry that Hollywood was forever marked by this act of violence. If you're a director of his caliber, with access to the resources that he has, would you let this go? Of course not. You would construct a movie, fill it with disparate stories about the life of an actor and his stuntman, and then in the final minutes, you would treat the Manson family with the same respect that Nazis have been afforded in your movies. You would burn them up. You would torture them. You would unleash all your anger on them. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a movie about a director trying to rewrite history. It's a deeply personal story because you can feel the brushwork in every scene. Tarantino is trying to achieve something that goes beyond normal storytelling. He's trying to create a new myth. A myth of the Hollywood he grew up worshipping, but this time it's cleaned up and unblemished. This time it's perfect. I enjoyed this effort quite significantly, and I give it an 8.5 out of 10. We have this Sergio Leone masterpiece to thank for the Once Upon a Time naming scheme. We also have Sergio Leone to thank for resurrecting the Western genre in the 1960s. While John Ford had spent his life constructing the myth of the cowboy gunslinger, by the early 1960s this genre was no longer in vogue. The French New Wave and Italian neorealism had forced Hollywood to adapt. Heroic cowboys were out. Realism was in. Sergio Leone took the mythologized cowboy and made him real. He was no longer the paragon that John Ford had envisioned. He was greedy, out for revenge, and really a hero. Clint Eastwood in the Dollars trilogy is the archetype of Sergio Leone's gunslinger. Harmonica and Cheyenne in Once Upon a Time in the West are this archetype pushed to its limits. This movie's story is so simple that you can summarize it in 2 or 3 sentences, but don't let this simplicity fool you. Sergio Leone takes these hackneyed themes of greed and revenge and constructs an unforgettable masterwork. It's a movie so good, it makes you forget that it exists within a genre that was practically dead. Jill walks into a world that's not easy on its occupants. She is married to Brett McBain and has come all the way from New Orleans to join him. Unfortunately, she finds Brett and his 3 children gunned down in their home. The motives are unclear. Brett had promised her a good life, wealth, peace, and all other grand illusions of matrimony. Instead, her presence in Sweetwater automatically conscripts her into a battle against an unknown assailant. More than once she tries to leave. More than once she is stopped by Harmonica, a mysterious gunslinger whose objectives regarding her are unclear. Sergio Leone traps his characters in this world. He expects them to thrive or die. At the top are the 3 main male characters, Harmonica, Cheyenne, and Frank. Below them is everyone. Jill survives because she has the attention of these 3 men. Harmonica is using her to gain revenge on Frank. Cheyenne wants her but knows that is not right for her. Frank desires her in the same way he desires her husband's land. As the movie progresses, it becomes clear that no one in this world is truly free. Even Morton, who is a railroad baron, and who can buy as many thugs as he wants, is not truly free. He is crippled at the mercy of Frank. Frank is a gunslinger. His pivot to business lasts as long as Jill's marriage to Brett. He realizes that his bloodthirst will take precedent over any other ambition. Harmonica has spent all of his life in pursuit of Frank. He manages to win Jill's love, but it's useless to him. Cheyenne, who's cut from the same cloth as him, knows that as soon as Frank is dead, Harmonica will simply ride away, never to be heard from again. Out of all the characters, it's Jill who has the best chance of survival. She will have her own town, a railroad passing through it, and unimaginable wealth. Perhaps one day, she'll gather her grandchildren and tell them the story of how she came to be in possession of Sweetwater. Frank is a villainous gunslinger who gets everything he desires. If anything stands between him and what he wants, he shoots it down. Unfortunately, this is no way to live, especially if you're in a Sergio Leone movie, because after a while, you'll end up killing the wrong person. Or even worse, you might end up leaving the wrong person alive. That's exactly what he does. He leaves Harmonica alive after ruthlessly killing his brother. For years, Harmonica has been tracking Frank with the hopes of having a duel with him. The movie opens with 3 of Frank's underlings waiting for Harmonica at a train station. They do not survive Harmonica's precision. When he gets to town, he hears the story of Brett McBain and decides to protect Jill. He's not going to let Frank win this time. He wins the respect of Cheyenne, who ends up being his partner in crime. Together, they systematically eradicate Frank's gang. By the end of the movie, Frank has to face Harmonica alone, without knowing who he is and why he's out for revenge. There are no wasted scenes in this movie. Every scene is either telling us something about the characters or moving the story forward towards its inevitable duel. Every character moment, every piece of dialogue, everything about this movie is epic. I rate it 9.5 out of 10. After half a decade of procrastinating, I've done it at last. For the first time in my life, I've watched Once Upon a Time in America. It was so long that I had no choice but to do this in 2 separate viewings. Given that it was directed by Sergio Leone, I expected the experience to be epic. In that regard, the film almost delivered. I wanted the movie to be filled to its brim, with complex characters and scenes that would live with me for the rest of my life. I should have tempered my expectations. As a juxtaposition, I need to speak about The Godfather. I had come across some reviews that claimed Once Upon a Time in America was the greatest gangster movie of all time. Honestly, I was excited. Finally, a challenger to The Godfather duology. The first time I watched The Godfather, it felt as if I had discovered color. Before The Godfather, my life had been monochrome. Afterwards, I couldn't stop thinking about the characters. I couldn't stop talking about Michael Corleone. I spent hours on YouTube entertaining theory upon theory regarding the Corleone family. If Once Upon a Time in America made me feel that intensely again, it would be akin to re-experiencing my first love. To be honest, it almost happened. Halfway through this movie, I almost believed Sergio Leone was about to dethrone The Godfather. Unfortunately, the movie's length became its undoing. As the clock ticked on, Once Upon a Time in America lost its magic. Something broke halfway through the 3rd hour, and with that the facade of epicness was dissolved. Instead of a great gangster movie, I found myself watching a conclusion that might as well have been written for a soap opera. When we meet Noodles, played by Robert De Niro, he's being pursued by the mob. Apparently, he tipped off the police and 3 of his most trusted friends were gunned down. He has to run away from New York. He returns 35 years later due to a mysterious letter. From the perspective of the older Noodles, we see how he grew up, how he met the individuals that will make up his inner circle, and how Max, a newcomer, became both his rival and the most important person in his young life. The first 2 hours of this movie can rival any film in the gangster canon. The Godfather, Goodfellas, Casino, Road to Perdition. Bring your favorite gangster movie into the argument, and you'll find that the first half of Once Upon a Time in America can hold its own. I've thought about why this half is perfect for 2 days now, and I think I have the answer. In this half, our young mobsters have antagonists they must deal with. The first one is the police officer who spends most of his time making their life miserable. They deal with him in a rather unique way. After this, they go against Bugsy, a mobster who was their employer but has now become their rival. Bugsy manages to kill one of them in perhaps one of the greatest scenes in all of gangster cinema. Noodles kills Bugsy and is sent off to jail. The second half of this movie is devoid of any antagonists. I don't know why Sergio Leone didn't invent one for them. He wrote Once Upon a Time in the West, a movie whose entire cast of characters is just antagonists. Instead, he chose the Civil War route. When Noodles comes out of jail, Max is the one in charge. Noodles has no issue with this, except that he hates the idea that Max has built a relationship with the Italian mob. As the movie progresses, it becomes obsessed with the rivalry between Max and Noodles. It spends too much time on relationships that these two have with women, and less time on gunfights and territorial gambles. I know, I can hear myself. It seems I want another Godfather or Goodfellas. But come on, the first half of this movie promised me a story at the same level as The Godfather Part 2. By the time the movie concludes, I'm no longer surprised. The twist at the end is less of a twist and more of a soap opera reveal. Oh, the guy you thought was dead 2 hours ago is in fact alive? Who cares? The first half of this movie was 10 out of 10. The second half was 6 out of 10. I give Once Upon a Time in America 8 out of 10. I would rewatch it but just until the gang pulls off the diamond heist. After that, I'd rather go on Netflix and put on a soap opera. I have a feeling the soap opera would offer a more coherent conclusion.